All right. Hello. Welcome. We are starting another series. We're still going to be recording Bible studies, and you can still go to those and be a part of those. But we also thought it'd be interesting to do a different series based on the response that I got from the sermon series that I did in June, July about the heritage of our nation. And I got a lot of feedback from that, positive feedback, and so we thought we would do some studies for some history and faith, and also doing the craziness that's the 21st century. And you're probably hearing Sadie. Those of you who know that. We record these here in our home, and so Sadie is my black lab, and when the mailman comes, she feels compelled to comment on his arrival. So just ignore that, but getting back to faith, history, and the craziness of the 21st century. And so it's going to cover a wide range of topics, but mostly a lot of history and how that feeds into what we're dealing with today, because we are dealing with some of the stuff that took place many years ago, and it still affects us today. And I want to draw a comparison, and I will do so in the days ahead. And so we'll be looking at a lot of American history, and biblical history, and also some of the craziness that's going on. And speaking of the craziness, if you, we're in an election cycle here, and if you were watching the debates, many of you are going to say, well, that was just a train wreck. And for the most part, yeah, I can agree with that. But also, I'm going to be giving you some insights into strategies and why we're going through what we're going through politically, culturally, and even how that affects us economically. But that's down the road. So we're going to get started today, and I thought I'd start today with an interesting discussion. I have on the board here two revolutions. And when you ask somebody in the academic world, in college or high school, and you say, if you were to say, give me the best or prime example of when democracy was born, most secular history teachers are going to point to the French Revolution. And the French Revolution took place 1789 to 1799. And it's really started a little earlier with disgruntlements in 1787, but the official slugfest that took place, known as the French Revolution, took place during those periods. And so it's during the French Revolution, this French Revolution, that you see the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. You see the demise of French King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette. And so you see the rise of the people, and in secular universities, that is what they will focus on, is democracy. But democracy back then didn't mean the same thing that it means today. Today, democracy is almost a byword for mob rule. And that is not really what democracy is meant to be. Democracy, like the United States, we are not a true democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And there's a difference. Democracy means the majority rules, and a constitutional republic gives everybody a say, but we have representatives that we vote on, and everybody gets a vote. If you're a citizen of our nation, I should qualify that. Not everybody who lives here, but everybody who is a citizen of our nation gets a vote, and we vote in local elections, we vote in state elections, and we vote in federal elections. And so everybody gets a vote, and then that vote is tallied and is is indicated to one of our electoral representatives of who we want to vote for. Like we have a presidential election coming up, and it is probably the most important presidential election in my lifetime. And I'm not being melodramatic. I think that if the wrong person gets in there, we could see the demise of our constitutional republic. And so we'll discuss that in days ahead, because a lot of people don't know the Constitution. Let me ask you this, and be honest. Have you read the Constitution of the United States? Hello? I can't hear you. Most people haven't. They say, well, it's so long, and the language that they use, it don't matter. That is what governs us. We are governed by the Constitution. We're not, listen, when I ask people that all the time, who governs us? They all say, oh, the president, the Congress and Senate. No. They all of those, the president, the Congress, Senate, the judges, the Supreme Court justices, they all take oaths to uphold and the Constitution of the United States. And here is the thing. If they are to uphold the Constitution of the United States, that means the Constitution governs us. We are a constitutional republic. And so our founders, great, when, and the Constitutional Convention, when it's all said and done, people were always waiting to see what we were, because before that we had Articles of Confederation, which meant they were articles in which all of the 13 original colonies agreed upon in a kind of a cooperative manner, and so they want to know, what are we? Are we a democracy? Are we a constitutional republic? What? And Benjamin Franklin said to the people that were waiting outside Constitutional Hall, they said, he says, we've given you a republic, a constitutional republic. Then he said, if you can keep it. And there is the key, if we can keep it. And for a lot of years, we did a really good job at keeping it. But like everything else, our founders, just geniuses when it came to this. They realized that everything can be overtaken, hijacked, if you will. Those are 21st century words. Corrupted. And so in that amendment process, it is a check and balance for how our government is. But anyway, we're talking about the French Revolution, and when you get into the academic world, secular historians and history teachers and all, they will always, very, very, very intelligently say, yes, I think we can point to the French Revolution as the epitome of the birth of democracy and the common people gaining power and doing away with the abuse of tyranny. And to that, I say baloney. That's malarkey. When you compare the two, the American Revolution, French Revolution, there's no comparison. The American Revolution was, yes, it was a war. Yes, there was bloodshed. But when the revolution was said and done, they didn't drag the supporters of King George, who we had plenty of those left in our country. They didn't drag them out of their homes, and they didn't put their heads on a block and chop their heads off with a guillotine. In the French Revolution, after the king is deposed, and King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, his wife, his queen, when their heads rolled down Main Street, I guess, I don't know where they did it, when that took place, then everybody who supported the king, they were dragging out down at the city square. Every little community had a guillotine, and it was known as the Reign of Terror. And it was a bloodbath. And so there's no comparison. The American Revolution, when it was all said and done, and the British, we had become an independent nation. We didn't drag people out into the street and chop their heads off. We didn't cast them into prisons. Really, they became our brethren. Now, yeah, there might have been tension between people, but hear me. We went back. This was a war, a revolutionary war is what we refer to it as. And yes, there was blood, and yes, there was combat. But this here was a mob rule, chaos out of control. And just to draw a similarity to that we're seeing today, I will tell you that Antifa and the organization of Black Lives Matter they are engaging in mob, quote, democracy rule of terror that the French Revolution birthed. And so really, when we look at the ideal situation and compare the two, American Revolution, in my humble opinion, is the epitome of the establishment of the power of the people. And not just power, but the responsibility. And so this is the epitome of the establishment of democracy, small d, not big D, through a constitutional republic. And so what created this, when we look at the French Revolution, why do our academics point to this one? Well, I'll give you a few comparisons. One is, I've shared with you in sermon series about the fact that the American Revolution is tied and whether you agree with me or not really doesn't hold water, because this is fact. Okay? The American Revolution was very much founded in the Bible. Okay? That is where our founding fathers looked at and turned to those biblical principles that's why our Declaration of Independence has this word, inalienable rights. You see, we're going to tie all this together here in just a minute, but we have inalienable rights. Do you know what your inalienable rights are? Most people don't. But the very first thing, very first part of the Constitution, the amendments, those are a part of our inalienable rights. Okay? And so we have this freedom of speech, the ability to say not just what we want, but the ability to and the freedom to speak truth. That was important to our founding fathers, that people not just say anything they want. You know, there are a lot of people who say a lot of weird stuff, and people take it with a grain of salt. But the ability to speak truth was that freedom. That's an inalienable right. Yes, you can express yourself, but really, it's not just about expressing yourself. They wanted to have the freedom, give the people freedom. If we did not like what our government and our leaders were doing, we could voice that. You see what I'm saying? And so that freedom of the press, freedom to put into print stories or print news that would allow people to be informed. That was very important for our founding fathers, was that our population, our people would be informed. The Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. And I don't care what you've heard from any politician, this wasn't about squirrel hunting or rabbit hunting or deer hunting with a musket. This was about allowing the people to have the exact same armament that the army would have. Because a disarmed population is much more easy for a government gone bad to control. And so the Second Amendment is an inalienable right. That is, and these inalienable rights are, they're the rights given to us by God. God gives us the right to express our opinion, our right to think a certain way, to think a certain thing, and to speak that thing. And He also gives us a right to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves from, and our family, our loved ones, from harm. That is our inalienable right. We can keep ourselves from becoming subjected, whether it is to a foreign power or to our own government. You have to remember, when this Constitution was formulated, it was formulated on the heels of an American Revolution, and that is what started it. When the British marched from Boston, Lexington, and Concord to Lexington and Concord, they were marching with the intent of confiscating the weapons from the colonials. And then, of course, we know a shot was fired that was heard around the world. No one really knows whether it was the colonials or the British that fired the shot. There are those who have theories. I have my own theory, but I'm just dealing with facts. No one knows who fired the shot, but it was fired, and colonials died on the green. Okay? And so, from that point on, it became what we know as the Revolutionary War. And of course, those British soldiers, which there was right around 1,000 of them, were routed back to Boston by the colonials, what we know as Minutemen. And the reason they were called that was in a moment's notice, they could be ready for battle. And so you could see this thing brewing and boiling, and maybe later on I can give you some insight in another lesson about what contributed, what built up to the American Revolution. And it starts all the way back in the French Indian Wars. That's what started all that boiling up. But the American Revolution, the founders were very much wrapped up in scriptures. No matter what you hear, our nation was founded on biblical principles. Okay? The French Revolution, they were not founded on principles. They were founded on human philosophy. Philosophy. Yeah, there we go. Got it. Aren't you proud? So, these were guys like Descartes and Rousseau and even John Locke. And John Locke was a minister. And so he doesn't get mentioned in the credits on the French Revolution nearly high enough as Descartes, Montesquieu, Rousseau. There are a number of Spinoza. De Spinoza is another one. And so all these philosophers were, and Descartes is probably the most famous one because he's the one who coined the phrase, "I think, therefore I am." And so, Miss Producer's laughing. But anyway, you can see the two. Now, let me just draw this comparison. We got two. We got two revolutions. Both are under the boot of tyranny. Okay? One, though, the principles founded in the Bible. It is very much, the founders are very much influenced by biblical scripture and principles. The other, the French Revolution, is human philosophy. Okay? And if I was to if I was allowed the license to venture an establishment for secular humanism, it would be the French Revolution. Okay, and so you can see why our secular educational institutions, our universities, our colleges, all look at these two things and they say, well, we certainly can't teach. We don't want the United States, the young people of the United States learning that the greatness of America was founded on biblical principles. No. So we're going to focus on the French Revolution. The French Revolution is going to be the epitome of what democracy is all about. But it was really this right here. How old is our country? 1776 to what? What's today? 2020. There's 245 years, something like that. She's doing the math for me real quick. This has lasted and is still, even though it is under attack, this has lasted. This French Revolution didn't last very long. Okay? At the end of the French Revolution, we see the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. He becomes a great figure in this French Revolution. So now Napoleon is emperor. And he and Josephine, wait, there we go. He is the emperor. And all of a sudden he goes to war and he conquers all of Europe. His downfall, like Hitler's, was going into Russia, invading Russia, and being drawn in to the Russian winter. Now, I am not a military genius, but I do know this, that it is much more difficult to fight in the snow and the mud and your vehicles. For Hitler, it was these vehicles. For Napoleon, it was his horses and his carts and the coldness and the ill uniforms of both armies couldn't keep that Russian cold out. And so the best weapon that Russia has, they bragged about it, the best weapon that Russia has is their weather, is their winter. And so, but Napoleon, he conquers all of Europe. And everybody thinks he is just unstoppable. Of course, everybody meets their Waterloo, as we've heard that phrase coined. That was his. And so Napoleon, the French are defeated by the European allies, English primarily. And so he's defeated, and all of a sudden they are back, and the next king of France is established. This time he does it a little bit different than his predecessor. He establishes a parliament, and they have a lot going on, and he gives a certain amount. He's known as the July King, and so he gives the people a certain amount of say, and they are placated for a while, but then that wears thin. There's corruption in his government. There's tyranny taking place. All of a sudden, he shuts down his parliament, and he's now the king. And all of a sudden, they depose him as well. And so, within a matter of just a few years, by the time 1830, by the time 1830 rolls around, 1835, they have their second revolution. So you can see, which one would you rather have? One based on humanistic philosophy that changes, that becomes subjective. Or this one that they founded a Declaration of Independence that is laced with biblical principle, along with a constitution that is derived and based on and very much influenced by biblical principles along with their leadership. And so this has lasted for how many years did we come up with? 244, I wasn't too far off, 245. 244 years this has lasted. They've already had 2 revolutions in a short time period. And so can you see some similarities to what's going on? I remember distinctly sitting in a history class and listening to a professor say, there is no such thing as history repeating itself. History does repeat itself. The faces may change, the names may change, the circumstances may change, but the root cause is this. The root cause is about destiny. And here, our founders in America wanted God to be the determining factor in the destiny of our nation. Whereas over here, human philosophy was going to be the determining factor. And when that takes place, when human philosophy is the determining factor, all of a sudden, then, like we're seeing today, wrong becomes right. Let me ask you this, and everything that you've seen on the news, what of the Seattle riots and the burning of the Minneapolis riots and the burning of buildings, the Kenosha riots and the burning of buildings and the killing of people and the disregard for authority, the disrespect for our very own president, and whether you like him or not, he's the president of the United States, duly elected by the people of a constitutional republic. And so now we see all that being undermined. And so it's like when you build a house, if you were to build a house and you built it on a brick foundation, and then you started to take bricks out of the foundation after you got the house built, you started to pull the bricks out, you see, it would begin to cave in. It would begin to give because it wouldn't be on a solid foundation. I can remember working on a house that needed a foundation repaired. And we had to go in and lift the whole house up at the same time. And then pour a new footing, repair the foundation, set the house back down. And really, that's almost a good analogy for what needs to take place in the United States today. We need to lift the United States of America up, not put it down. We need to lift it up together. It has to be together. We had to do that in that house together. We were under there with heavy-duty jacks, lifting it up. We had to do that simultaneously so that nothing shifted, nothing cracked, so that we could repair the foundation. And we repaired the foundation not with something that was of weaker material, but something that was of the same strength material. And so that is what needs to be done. We need to lift up our nation. We need to lift it up. The best way we can do that is through prayer. The best way we can do that is to be involved. If you are a Christian today and you are saying, I don't know if I'm going to vote in the election, shame on you. Everybody needs to vote in this election. And I'm not telling you who to vote for, but you need to vote. But I can tell you, and you probably already know who I'm going to vote for because of the principle factor. I am not buying in to French Revolution philosophy that's being dealt out today and being demonstrated by the mass mob of, quote, democracy, small d. In fact, I'm not even sure that it's democratic. It is more anarchy than anything. And so I am not buying into that. I would much rather repair the foundation of our great nation and restore the principles of the scriptures that it was founded on, and bring the integrity and the exceptionalism of the United States of America back to where our nation's founders wanted it. By the way, if you get uncomfortable with the idea of American exceptionalism, that wasn't coined by the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. It wasn't coined by Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin. I'll tell you who it was coined by. In fact, I'm reading the book again, Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. And Tocqueville is the one who coined the phrase American exceptionalism. As he toured this country for a year, he took and toured. As he went all over this great nation, just after the War of 1812, he came over to visit. He came over to visit on the basis of inspecting our country's penal system. He was touring prisons, and that was just the reason he wanted to come over here and find out what was going on in America. So him and his best friend came over. They were part of the July King's government at the time. They were appointed because he was a lawyer. Tocqueville was a lawyer. So he came over, looked at the prison system, wrote his report, sent it back with his friends, stayed over here and toured the United States and went everywhere. He went into the cities. He went, in fact, he had rather an epiphany moment in the woods of Michigan, northern Michigan, as he made his way up through Michigan and into some of Canada and then back down into Wisconsin. And those were the frontier elements of our nation at that time. But as he was going everywhere, he noticed two things. One was everybody had an opportunity to own property. That was important back then, to own property. In Europe, only the nobles could own property. And so he made reference to that. Through his book, he makes reference to that a lot, that any man can own property. And he did recognize the fact that slavery was still going on and at that time in our nation. But he wasn't focused on that. He was focused on these communities. And the communities, one, everybody could own property. They had the right to pursue life, liberty, and to pursue happiness. And so that is one of the things he noticed. The other thing that he noticed was everybody was involved. Let me back up. Not everybody was involved, but the church had a great influence in communities. And he picked up on that. Christianity had a tremendous influence, he wrote to his father, a tremendous influence in the communities that made up the United States of America. And so he was absolutely fascinated by that because he himself was a Catholic and had at one time considered going into the priesthood, but became, as he was tutored by the priest, became disenfranchised a little bit with French Catholicism. But anyway, he makes his way to the United States and he notices those things. And that is an amazing thing. So he fell in love with the, as Bono put it, of YouTube, the idea of the United States of America. You see, I will quote Bono of YouTube, and I believe he's speaking at Georgetown University. And he makes reference, Dinesh D'Souza in his book, America, Imagine a World Without Her, makes reference to this, quotes him. But if you watch the video, I was moved to tears the first time because here's a guy, he's Irish, and what he says is this: the United States of America is not just a great country. He says there are a lot of great countries in the world. Ireland, he refers to his own country. He says Ireland's a great country. Great Britain's a great country. Australia's a great country. Canada, there are a lot of great countries in the world. There are a lot of them. He says, but America is a great idea. He said, only in America. He says, your founders were able to put down on paper what every other leader in history was trying to find out, what they were searching for. And so when we think of the epitome of as much as we can when it comes to countries and nations, when it comes to democracy, true democracy, not mob rule kind of stuff, but a republic, a constitutional republic like our founders established. When we think of that, the only one that can come to mind, the only name on the list is America. That grabbed Tocqueville so deeply that he's the one who said, American exceptionalism is a wondrous thing. We do not have to hang our heads as Americans. We shouldn't hang our heads as Americans. And nor should we roll over and believe everything that is being fed to us by media, by revised history. In the days ahead, we're going to look at the education system and how it took a turn. And I know that there are a lot of teachers. I've got a lot of respect for teachers. I would love to be a teacher. In fact, before I came to be your pastor, I was putting out resumes to be a history professor at colleges, and I would love that as well. Couldn't you see me in a class with a bunch of college kids that really think they know what life is all about? I would just relish that sometime. And so, but let's not buy into everything we're being fed. The United States is not the cause of all the world's problems. Okay? Have we had issues? Absolutely. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, two documents that are not fluid, they're not changing. Okay? Those two documents right there were designed to allow our nation to grow and come to an understanding of what those truth principles in those documents are really all about. The problem we've run into is that the old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's some truth to that. And we'll be looking at some political things too in the days ahead. But the problem is not with the Constitution. The problem's not with the Declaration. The problem's not with our founding principles and our founding fathers. The problem is that we have leaders, many leaders now, not just federal. We have state leaders. We have local leaders who want to hang on to the power. They think power is it. And let me just tell you something. I'm a minister of a church. I'm a father of a family. I'm a grandfather of many grandchildren. I am, I think, a contributor to the community. And those aren't things that I take lightly. Those are positions of responsibility. And one day I'm going to stand before God Almighty, and He's going to say, Jeff, as a minister, how did you do for me? Jeff, as a citizen of your country, how did you do? Jeff, as a father and leader of your family, how did you influence them for me? You see, it all comes down to that. And what's really under attack today isn't just our freedoms. Freedom is being attacked. But what's really under attack is truth. And so all the way back, I could divide this all the way back. Bible, God's truth, human philosophy. You can take that argument all the way back to the Garden of Eden when Satan proposed to Adam and Eve the lie, the deception. Well, we'll pick it up next week with another topic. I hope you enjoy this one. If you do, like our YouTube page, join it, subscribe, alneychurch.com, and give us some feedback. You're more than welcome to email me at redneckpreacher2017@gmail.com, or you can catch me out in the community if you see me. Don't be afraid to approach me and talk to me, ask me a question. Doesn't matter. You're welcome. If you don't like it, you're more than welcome to tell me that. Will I be offended? No. Will I stop? No. But you have the freedom not to watch the next time. But we're going to have some other stuff that we're going to be dealing with in history, and I hope you'll tune in and join in with us next time. God bless.